failure is not the end, it's just the beginning of a greater story. Daniel had a dream to build a cafe that would bring people together. But when his first business crumbled, he faced the harsh reality of failure. With no money, no direction, and whispers of doubt surrounding him, he had two choices: give up or rise again. This is a story of resilience, of turning setbacks into stepping stones, and of proving that true success is not about never falling, it's about having the courage to rise every time you do. Will Daniel reclaim his dream, or will failure define him forever? The first fall **** Daniel had always been a dreamer. Growing up in a small town with limited opportunities, he found solace in books and stories of great entrepreneurs who had built empires from nothing. His father, a humble shopkeeper, and his mother, a schoolteacher, always encouraged him to study hard and secure a stable job. They believed in the security that education provided, the assurance that a steady paycheck would never let him down. But Daniel was different. He did not want the comfort of a fixed salary, he wanted to create something of his own. He wanted to build a business, not just for wealth but to leave a mark on the world. As a child, he was always fascinated by the small businesses around him. He watched shopkeepers negotiate with customers, observed how they managed inventory, and listened carefully when his father spoke about supply and demand. It intrigued him how a single idea, if executed well, could turn into a thriving business. His father often told him, a man who works for himself is his own master, but he must also carry the weight of his own success and failure. These words stayed with Daniel, fueling his ambition as he grew older. At the age of 18, Daniel decided to turn his dreams into reality. He had always loved coffee, and he believed his town lacked a good cafe where people could come together, relax, and share ideas. He had a vision of a cozy space filled with the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee, where students could study, writers could work, and friends could chat for hours. To him, it wasn't just about selling coffee, it was about creating an experience. With excitement brimming in his heart, he shared his idea with his parents. His mother was hesitant. "Running a business is not as easy as it looks, Daniel. Are you sure you're ready?" she asked. His father, though skeptical, saw the fire in his son's eyes. "If this is what you truly want, then I will support you," he said, handing Daniel a small sum of money he had saved over the years. It was not a huge amount, but enough to get started. With that money, Daniel rented a small space in town and began setting up his cafe. He named it Daniel's Brew, hoping it would become the go-to place for coffee lovers. He spent days painting the walls, choosing furniture, and crafting a menu. He personally sourced coffee beans from a local supplier, wanting to ensure quality. Every detail mattered to him. The grand opening day arrived, and Daniel felt like he was on top of the world. Friends and family came to support him, and the cafe buzzed with excitement. The first few weeks were magical, people were curious, and the seats were mostly filled. But soon, the real challenges began. Daniel quickly realized that passion alone was not enough to run a business. He had no prior experience in management, marketing, or financial planning. Customers were inconsistent. Some days the cafe was full, while on others, it was empty. He had priced his coffee too low in an attempt to attract customers, but this left him struggling to cover expenses. He mismanaged inventory, often running out of popular items or wasting ingredients. On top of that, competition was fierce. Established cafes in the area had loyal customers, and despite his enthusiasm, Daniel found it hard to attract regular patrons. He tried everything, offering discounts, experimenting with new menu items, even handing out flyers on the street. But nothing seemed to work. The stress began to weigh on him. He worked from dawn till midnight, yet profits remained minimal. He barely slept, constantly worrying about rent, wages, and bills. The pressure mounted, and the excitement he once felt turned into anxiety. One evening, after a particularly bad day, Daniel sat alone in his empty cafe. The chairs were neatly arranged, the counter spotless, yet there was no one to serve. He stared at the pile of unpaid bills, his heart sinking. He had put everything into this business, and now he was on the brink of failure. The bell at the door jingled softly, and Daniel looked up to see his father walk in. He had avoided facing his parents for weeks, ashamed of his failing business. His father sat down across from him, his eyes filled with quiet understanding. "Rough day?" he asked. Daniel nodded, his throat tightening. "More like a rough year." He hesitated, then finally admitted, "I think I made a mistake. Maybe I was never meant for business." His father sighed and looked around the cafe. "Do you remember when you were little, and you tried to learn how to ride a bicycle?" Daniel frowned, unsure where this was going. "Yeah. I fell a lot." His father smiled. "Yes, you did. And every time you fell, you got back up and tried again. Until one day, you rode without falling. Business is no different, son. You have to fall before you learn how to balance." Daniel swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his father's words. "But I don't know how to fix this," he admitted. His father leaned forward. "Then learn. Every failure teaches you something. Right now, you know more about running a business than you did when you started. Take that knowledge and use it. If this cafe doesn't work, try again, but smarter this time." Despite the comfort in his father's words, the pain of failure was unbearable. The thought of closing down his cafe felt like giving up on his dream. But deep inside, he knew his father was right. He had made mistakes, but he had also learned. This wasn't the end, it was just a lesson. With a heavy heart, Daniel made the difficult decision to close his cafe. The final day was emotional. As he locked the doors for the last time, he felt a mix of disappointment and relief. It was over, but maybe, just maybe, it was also the beginning of something new. The humiliation of facing people who had once cheered for him was overwhelming. He could hear the whispers, asterisk asterisk, "Did you hear? Daniel's cafe shut down. Guess he wasn't cut out for business after all." The words stung, but he refused to let them define him. As he walked home that night, he promised himself one thing: this is not the end. Failure had knocked him down, but it had also taught him valuable lessons. He had learned the importance of financial planning, customer service, and the harsh realities of competition. More than anything, he had learned that success was not about never falling, it was about having the courage to stand up every time he did. With that thought, Daniel knew he would try again. But this time, he would be smarter, stronger, and more prepared. Because failure was just the beginning of his journey. The rise from ashes after the closure of his cafe, Daniel found himself at a crossroads. The sting of failure weighed heavily on his heart, but deep inside, a voice kept telling him that this was not the end. He knew that he had made mistakes, but he also knew that he had gained experience. However, experience alone was not enough, he needed knowledge. He needed to understand what he had done wrong so that he would never repeat those mistakes again. With that realization, he decided to step back and learn before making his next move. He had spent all his savings on his first cafe, and now, without money or a business, he needed to find a job. Instead of looking for just any job, he applied to work at one of the most successful cafes in the city. His goal was simple: to learn from the best. Daniel started as a waiter, something that felt like a huge step backward after owning his own cafe. At first, he struggled with the idea of working for someone else, especially in a place that reminded him of his own failed business. But he quickly realized that this was his opportunity to observe, learn, and absorb everything that made a cafe successful. For months, he watched how the business was run. He observed how the staff interacted with customers, how the inventory was managed, and how marketing played a crucial role in attracting people. He noticed that this cafe didn't just sell coffee, it sold an experience. The ambience, the music, the customer service, everything was carefully planned. Unlike his own cafe, where he had made decisions based on gut feeling, this business was run with strategy and precision. One day, Daniel found himself in a conversation with the cafe's owner, Mr. Harrison, a well-respected businessman who had spent decades in the food and beverage industry. "You're different from my other employees," Mr. Harrison noted as they sat in his office. "Most people come here just for the paycheck, but I've seen the way you observe everything. You ask questions. You take notes. You're here to learn, aren't you?" Daniel hesitated before nodding. "I had my own cafe once. I thought passion was enough, but I was wrong. I failed. Now, I want to learn how to do it right." Mr. Harrison studied him for a moment before smiling. "Failure is the best teacher, if you choose to learn from it. The fact that you're here instead of giving up tells me that you have the mindset of a real entrepreneur." From that day on, Mr. Harrison took Daniel under his wing. He shared insights on business management, financial planning, and customer psychology. He taught Daniel that running a cafe was not just about serving good coffee, it was about creating an experience that made people want to come back. One of the most valuable lessons Daniel learned was the importance of financial discipline. Mr. Harrison showed him how to manage costs, price products effectively, and reinvest profits wisely. Daniel realized that one of the biggest mistakes he had made in his first business was poor financial management. He had spent too much on unnecessary things and priced his coffee too low, leaving him with barely any profit. Daniel also learned about branding and marketing. Mr. Harrison explained how the cafe used social media, customer loyalty programs, and seasonal promotions to keep people engaged. "You can have the best coffee in the world," he told Daniel, "but if no one knows about it, your business will fail." For 2 years, Daniel worked tirelessly, soaking in every lesson, every detail. He was no longer just an employee, he was a student of business. He worked extra shifts, volunteered to help with inventory, and even spent his free time researching business strategies. He saved every penny he could, determined to try again, only this time, he would be ready. By the time he turned 21, Daniel felt that he was finally prepared. He had a new vision, a stronger strategy, and a better understanding of what made a business successful. He had saved up a decent amount of money, but he knew it wasn't enough to start a cafe on his own. Instead of borrowing from his father again, he decided to seek investors. Armed with a detailed business plan, he approached small investors in town, including family friends and local entrepreneurs. He shared his vision, his past failures, and most importantly, what he had learned. His honesty and determination impressed people, and soon, he was able to secure enough funding to open his second cafe. This time, he didn't rush. He spent months finding the perfect location, one with good foot traffic but less competition. He carefully designed the cafe to create a warm and inviting atmosphere. He crafted a menu that combined traditional flavors with new, unique offerings. Most importantly, he applied everything he had learned about financial management, customer service, and marketing. Finally, the grand opening of Daniel's Brew 2.0 arrived. Unlike his first cafe, where he had been naive and unprepared, this time, he was ready. The opening was a huge success. Thanks to his marketing efforts, social media presence, and word-of-mouth promotions, people came in large numbers. Customers were impressed with the quality of the coffee, the ambience, and the friendly service. But Daniel knew that the real challenge wasn't the opening day, it was keeping people coming back. He personally interacted with customers, making them feel valued. He took feedback seriously, constantly improving based on what people wanted. He ensured that every cup of coffee served was of the highest quality, and he trained his staff to maintain excellent service. Within months, Daniel's Cafe became one of the most popular spots in town. His parents, who had once feared for his future, now beamed with pride every time they visited. His father, who had once lent him money for his failed cafe, now sat at a corner table every evening, watching his son's dream come to life. Despite the success, Daniel never let himself become complacent. He remembered how overconfidence and lack of planning had led to his first failure, and he refused to make the same mistake twice. He constantly innovated, introduced new flavors, collaborated with local artists for special events, and built strong relationships with his customers. One evening, as he stood behind the counter, watching his cafe filled with happy customers, he reflected on how far he had come. He thought about the 18-year-old boy who had once believed that passion alone was enough to build a business. He thought about the failures, the lessons, the struggles. And he realized that without those hardships, he would never have become the person he was today. As he wiped down the counter, a young aspiring entrepreneur approached him. "Daniel, I really admire what you've built. I want to start my own business too, but I'm afraid of failing. What if it doesn't work?" Daniel smiled, recognizing the same fear he had once felt. "Failure is not the opposite of success," he said. "It's part of the journey. The only real failure is giving up." That night, as he locked up the cafe and walked home, he felt something he had never felt before, not just happiness, but fulfillment. He had fallen, he had learned, and he had risen again. And he knew that this was just the beginning of something even greater. Triumph over challenges. Daniel's Cafe, Daniel's Brew 2.0, had become a local success. The once struggling young entrepreneur had now built a brand that people recognized and loved. Customers came in not just for the coffee but for the experience, the cozy ambience, the live music, and the personal touch that made the cafe feel like home. Every morning, Daniel would stand behind the counter, greeting customers, ensuring everything ran smoothly, and reminding himself of how far he had come. However, success was never a straight road. Just as things were settling into a rhythm, a new challenge appeared, one that threatened everything he had worked for. One morning, as Daniel was reviewing sales reports in his office, his manager, Claire, walked in with a concerned expression. "Daniel, have you heard the news?" she asked, placing her phone in front of him. Daniel took the phone and read the headline, "International Coffee Chain Opening in Town, New Store Just Blocks Away from Daniel's Brew." His heart sank. He had heard about the coffee giant before. It was a multinational brand with stores worldwide, known for its aggressive marketing, lower prices, and ability to overshadow smaller businesses. Their arrival in the same neighborhood meant direct competition, and Daniel knew what this could mean for his cafe. For the next few weeks, the town was buzzing with excitement. Advertisements for the new coffee chain were everywhere, on billboards, social media, and even in newspapers. They were offering discounts, promotions, and loyalty programs that Daniel's small business couldn't afford to match. At first, Daniel's Brew continued running as usual, but soon, he started noticing the effects. Some of his regular customers began visiting the new coffee chain, curious about the hype. Daily sales dropped slightly, and foot traffic wasn't as consistent as before. One evening, after closing the cafe, Daniel sat alone in his office, staring at the financial reports. The numbers weren't devastating yet, but if this trend continued, he knew it could be a problem. His mind drifted back to his first business, the one that had failed. Back then, when things got tough, he had panicked, made rash decisions, and eventually lost everything. But he wasn't that same person anymore. He had learned from failure. And if he was going to face competition, he had to do it strategically. The next day, he called a staff meeting. His employees were worried. Some feared that the cafe wouldn't survive against such a massive competitor. Daniel stood before them with a determined expression. "We are not just selling coffee," he told them. "We are selling an experience. We are selling warmth, community, and authenticity. The big chains can offer convenience, but they can't offer what we can, genuine human connection." His words reignited hope among his team. They knew that Daniel's Brew wasn't just a business, it was a place where people felt welcome, where customers were more than just numbers. Determined to fight back, Daniel came up with a plan. Instead of trying to compete with the coffee giant on price, he decided to focus on what made his cafe unique. First, he introduced a new specialty menu featuring locally sourced ingredients. He partnered with nearby farmers to create exclusive coffee blends that couldn't be found anywhere else. He also added homemade pastries, offering flavors that connected with the local culture. Next, he focused on customer engagement. He launched a Meet the Owner series where he personally interacted with customers, sharing his journey, listening to their feedback, and making them feel like a part of the cafe story. He encouraged his employees to build genuine relationships with customers, remembering names, favorite drinks, and making every visitor feel valued. Then, he ramped up marketing efforts. Instead of traditional advertisements, he used social media to tell his story. He shared posts about his journey, his failures, his lessons, and his dreams. People connected with his honesty. His posts went viral in the community, and soon, customers started returning, not just because of the coffee, but because they wanted to support someone who had worked so hard to build something meaningful. Lastly, he turned his cafe into a community hub. He started hosting weekly events, open mic nights, book readings, coffee tasting sessions, and art exhibitions. Local artists and musicians appreciated the opportunity. And in return, they brought their friends and followers, introducing new customers to Daniel's Brew. Slowly but surely, the cafe regained momentum. Sales started improving, foot traffic increased, and despite the strong competition, Daniel's Brew remained a beloved spot in town. One evening, as Daniel was closing up, he noticed a familiar face sitting at a corner table. It was Mr. Harrison, his former mentor. "I see you've been busy," Mr. Harrison said with a smile. Daniel chuckled. "Busy surviving." Mr. Harrison nodded. "You did more than survive. You adapted. That's what separates real entrepreneurs from the rest, the ability to adapt when things get tough." Daniel thought about it. Years ago, when his first cafe failed, he had felt like a failure himself. But now, he understood that challenges were just opportunities in disguise. Every obstacle had taught him something valuable, and this competition was no different. Months passed, and Daniel's Brew continued to thrive. While the international coffee chain remained successful, it never managed to overshadow Daniel's Brew. In fact, many customers preferred Daniel's Cafe because of the personal touch, the warmth, and the sense of community that no corporation could replicate. One day, a young aspiring entrepreneur approached Daniel. He was nervous but determined. "Mr. Daniel, I really admire what you've built. I have a dream of starting my own business, but I'm afraid. What if I fail?" Daniel smiled, feeling himself on the moment. He thought back to his own fears, his own failures, and the lessons he had learned along the way. "Let me tell you something," he said. "Failure is not the opposite of success, it's a part of it. Every great entrepreneur you admire has failed at some point. The difference between those who succeed and those who don't is simple: the ones who succeed never stop trying." The young man listened intently, nodding. "You will fail," Daniel continued. "Maybe once, maybe twice. But each time, you'll learn. Each time, you'll grow. And if you refuse to give up, one day, you'll turn that failure into something extraordinary." The young man left with renewed determination, and Daniel watched him go with a sense of fulfillment. He had started his journey as an eager dreamer, stumbled into failure, risen again, and now, he was in a place where he could inspire others. That night, as Daniel locked up Daniel's Brew, he looked around at what he had built. The warm lights, the sound of laughter, the scent of freshly brewed coffee, it was more than just a business. It was a symbol of perseverance, resilience, and the power of never giving up. He knew that challenges would always come. There would always be competition, economic downturns, unexpected obstacles. But now, he was no longer afraid. Because he had learned the most valuable lesson of all: true success is not measured by how many times you win, but by how many times you rise after falling. With that thought, he smiled, ready to face whatever the future had in store. Because no matter what happened, he would always get back up, stronger than before.